My name is Uriel Orlow. I'm a visual artist. I grew up in Switzerland and studied in London and lived there for a long time. And now I'm based out of Lisbon. So I came here earlier this year to start the research for this exhibition. And as an artist, I'm interested in plants and plants as political actors or agents, and also plants as witnesses. That's one thing. And I'm also interested in alternative archives. Since this exhibition is around archives, a lot of my work has been considering things that we don't immediately think of as archives in an archival way. So for example, a botanical garden usually is a colonial archive. It's a place where plants from different parts of the world were brought together as part of the colonial project of exploring and exploiting large parts of the world. So I've been interested in how plants and humans are entangled with each other, how our histories are shared in a way, and how plants are not just a backdrop, but they're sort of really part of our shared history. So for this exhibition, I'm presenting two works which are kind of related. The first work is a series of 20 prints, which is called Mangoes of Goan Origin, an archive. And it presents 20 mangoes that come from Goa, and it's, sort of present a sort of archive. What kind of archive is this? These mangoes all have Portuguese names. So this already tells us something. They started to be developed in the 16th century when the Portuguese first arrived here. They loved the mangoes. They thought it to be the king of all the fruit. But they wanted to have specific kinds of mangoes that could be cut or eaten without strings and things like that. So the Jesuits introduced the technique of grafting to Goa, which is a way of reproducing a particular tree without crossing it with another tree. So it's a form of cloning. It's an early form of cloning. So that produces stable varieties. And so they produced a number of varieties, and each of these mango variety has a Portuguese name, often named after a governor or after a landowner or after somebody maybe who commissioned these new mangoes. And the mangoes became an important part of the Portuguese trade in the 16th century, where Goa became for a moment a sort of quite important place in the Portuguese world, but also in the world around here, quite cosmopolitan, with a lot of trade going on in all directions. And the mangoes were contributing significantly to the Estado da Índia's sort of then economy. So what struck me with these mangoes is that they only tell a part of that story because they have Portuguese names. They're appropriated sort of into Portuguese culture, into Portuguese language, and they become what could be called a monocultural archive. So what I wanted to do was reintroduce the kind of cosmopolitan complexity, the diversity, the linguistic kind of variety that existed at that time in the 16th century and continues to exist. So each of the mangoes that is presented here is superimposed with the first letter of its name in a different language that would have been used around that time in this sort of geographical zone. So we have a lot of local languages or scripts, such as Kannada and other scripts, which are also used for Konkani, and scripts also from a little bit wider afield that were part of this kind of trading thing. So now we have a more complex archive. We have a multifaceted archive that tells us something about this story that started in the 16th century and in a sense continues today. So the second work that I'm presenting, I suppose is also connected a little bit in that one of the first mentions of the Portuguese of the mango was in a book by Garcia da Orta, a physician from Portugal, a Jewish physician from Portugal who moved to Goa to escape the Inquisition in Portugal and stayed here for the rest of his life. And he was very interested in local knowledge about plants and their uses, medicinal uses especially. And he was talking to a lot of people, and he had sort of informants and translators. So he was not just imposing his own knowledge and ignoring what's already there, but he was very much a very sort of early sort of example of what now is called ethnobotany. And he published a book in 1563 on the plants and their uses in India. And in this book, he mentions the mango as the king of all the fruit. But the book itself is very interesting because it's written in the form of a dialogue between Garcia da Orta and a guy from the street who's called Ruano, which basically means a street guy. And the conversation is about the plants and the uses of the plants. And I wanted to revisit this conversation in the present, but also with a kind of feel of the 16th century, this Renaissance moment. And so I'm staging the conversation, in a sense, filmed between two gardens. One is the garden called Garcia da Orta Garden in Panjim, and the other is Garcia da Orta Garden in Lisbon. So what we see is these two gardens that are named after Garcia da Orta, and a conversation ensues between the two gardens, as it were, or between Garcia da Orta in Panjim and Ruano in Lisbon. And the conversation focuses on, I suppose, Garcia da Orta's interest in plants and his worldview and what this might mean today in a moment where we have other challenges like climate change and the loss of species, plant species, animal species, due to various pressures. So it's a kind of conversation between the present and the past, between Goa and Portugal, between Lisbon and Panjim, and between Garcia da Orta, a physician, a specialist, and a person from the street. I think that sums up the two works that I'm presenting here, and maybe we can leave it there.